Ambassador Una Park stood by the viewport of the Harmony Station, watching the blue-white glow of Proxima Centauri cast long shadows across the diplomatic quarters. She smoothed her formal grey uniform, fingers tracing the golden emblem of Earth that rested above her heart. 20 years of Cold War with the Talons had left humanity exhausted but unbroken. Now everything hinged on the next 3 days. "The military transport has docked, Ambassador," said Deho, her chief of security. His face remained neutral, but Una caught the tension in his shoulders. The security team had opposed this mission from the start. "Thank you, Deho. Please, escort our guests to the reception area, and remember, they'll be watching our every move." Una turned back to the viewport. The Talons had evolved in the heavy gravity of a distant world, their bodies short and dense with muscles beneath iridescent scales. In space, they moved with unexpected grace. Their ships, sleek crystalline structures that defied human engineering principles, had established a perimeter around the station. "They've brought twice the agreed security detail," Deho reported through her earpiece. "Their ambassador Hansu has requested immediate audience." "Granted," Una replied, "but scan everything they bring aboard." The reception hall featured a circular table, a deliberate choice to avoid any perception of sides. Una entered last, as protocol dictated, finding Hansu already seated. The Talon representative's emerald scales gleamed under the soft lights. Ambassador Park, Hansu's translator device, converted his clicking language to smooth Korean. "Your journey was without incident?" "Perfectly smooth," Una replied, taking her seat. "Though I notice your fleet has positioned themselves rather defensively." Hansu's inner eyelids flickered, a gesture Una had learned indicated amusement. "Merely precaution, the same as your battle cruisers hiding behind Proxima's fourth planet." Una smiled. At least they were starting with honesty. Back on Earth, the War Council had given her mission a 30% chance of success. General Tay had pounded his fist on the table, insisting that the scale faces only understand force. But President Suk had overruled him. "We've tried force for 20 years, she had said. "Let's try Una's way." Now, looking at Hansu's calculating gaze, Una wondered if the general had been right. "Let me introduce my team," she said, gesturing to the humans entering the room. "My science advisor, Dr. Sang, my cultural attaché, Bomi, and my security chief, Deho." Hansu acknowledged each with a slight bow. "My seconds," he said, indicating the 3 Talons behind him. Their names were untranslatable clicks that Una's team had coded as Blue, Stone, and River for simplicity. After pleasantries, they moved to the primary conference room. On the walls, holograms displayed both Earth and Helios, the Talon homeworld, rotating slowly. A symbolic gesture. "For equality, we've prepared data packets summarizing our position," Una said, tapping her console. "The border territories near Epsilon Indi should be declared neutral zones with joint mining rights established." Hansu received the data without comment. "Your proposal will be considered. First, however, we must address the religious incursions." Una kept her expression neutral despite the unexpected topic. Religious incursions, human colonists spreading their beliefs to worlds where Talon influence is established. It undermines the order of luminance. Hansu's voice remained calm, but his scales had darkened, a sign of agitation. This was not on any briefing Una had received. "Ambassador, no official Earth policy promotes religious expansion. Private citizens are reflections of your government's true intent," Hansu interrupted. "The divine hierarchy must be preserved." Una studied him closely. The Talon religious structure, which positioned their species as cosmically superior, had always complicated negotiations, but never had it been raised so immediately. "Perhaps this is an opportunity to better understand each other's cultural values," Bomi suggested smoothly. "Our AI translators have recently improved their comprehension of Talon's spiritual concepts." As the discussion progressed through the day, Una noted peculiar patterns. The Talons seemed to deflect practical matters while fixating on abstract threats to their belief system. When Dr. Sang presented data on shared scientific ventures that could benefit both species, the Talons received it with apparent enthusiasm that never materialized into concrete commitments. That evening, in her private quarters, Yuna reviewed recordings of the day's interactions with her team. They're stalling, Deho concluded. The question is why. They requested these talks, Yuna mused. Why arrange peace negotiations you don't intend to pursue? Dr. Sang analyzed patterns in their translator data. Their language, when discussing religion, contains significant stress markers. Whatever. This is about their belief system is central. Unknown to the humans aboard the Thailand flagship, a very different conversation was taking place. High Priest Quan addressed the gathered commanders, his senior scales gleaming with ceremonial oils. The human delegation must be eliminated, he declared. Their presence in our space is an abomination. The prophecy is clear. If humans are allowed to spread, the divine light will dim. Commander Jun, youngest of the war leaders, dared to speak. The negotiations could secure us the Epsilon sector without bloodshed, Quan hissed sharply. Negotiations legitimize their equality. The scriptures teach that all non-Talons are lesser beings. These humans particularly threaten us because they look almost like us in form, yet lack the divine spark. They mock creation itself. What the Talons couldn't understand through the filter of their absolute certainty, was that Ambassador Park had anticipated religious resistance. In her quarters, she activated a secure channel to the cloaked human vessel monitoring communications from the Talon fleet. Any breakthrough on their encrypted channels? She asked. Partial, Ambassador, came the reply. We've decoded references to something called the Purification, scheduled during tomorrow's ceremony. Yuna's expression hardened. She had truly hoped for peace, but hope couldn't blind her to reality. She opened a secured drawer and removed a small device, pressing her thumb to its scanner. Contingency Alpha, she said softly. Be ready. As the artificial night cycle of Harmony Station began, both sides prepared for the next day's talks, each with plans the other couldn't imagine and consequences that would echo across the stars. The grand pavilion aboard Harmony Station glittered with the soft blue lights that had been specially calibrated to please both human and Talon eyes. Crystal decanters filled with drinks suitable for both species caught the light, casting rainbows across the polished obsidian tables. Ambassador Yuna Park adjusted her formal diplomatic sash, the silver threads catching the light as she prepared to address the assembled dignitaries. A moment, Deho whispered, leaning close to her ear. Security scan complete, all clear. Yuna nodded almost imperceptibly. The first 2 days of negotiations had been tense, but productive. Today, they had finally broken through on the territorial disputes around the Epsilon sector. The Talons had unexpectedly conceded 3 contested moons, a gesture that had caught her team off guard. Optimistic? Dr. Sang asked, appearing at her side with 2 glasses of the non-alcoholic pink champagne that had become popular across Earth colonies. Cautiously, Yuna replied, accepting the drink. They gave up those moons too easily. The Tylon delegation entered the pavilion, their scaled bodies adorned with ceremonial metals that clinked softly as they moved. Ambassador Hansu led them, his emerald scales polished to a high shine. Behind him walked High Priest Quan, an unexpected addition who had arrived that morning. The presence of their religious leader could be a positive sign, Bomi had suggested, during their morning briefing. Perhaps they're preparing their society for a major diplomatic shift. Yuna wasn't convinced, but she'd maintained her diplomatic smile. Now, as the formal dinner began, she watched the Talons carefully. Their translator devices hummed softly at their throats, converting the complicated clicks and whistles of their native tongue into smooth human language. The neutral observers, tall willowy beings from the Andromeda Alliance, stood along the walls, their multifaceted eyes recording everything for the galactic archives. To new understandings, Yuna raised her glass in the traditional human toast, Hansu, mirrored her gesture with his own drinking vessel, to the future that awaits us all. Something in his tone made Yuna's diplomatic instincts flare with warning, but she maintained her composure. The first course, a synthesized protein that resembled Earth salmon, but contained amino acids digestible by both species, was served by the station's service robots. We have reviewed your proposals for the joint scientific outpost at Proxima, B, Hansu said, his translator device giving his voice an almost musical quality. My government finds the terms acceptable. Daiho, seated 3 places down, caught Yuna's eye briefly. This was another unexpected concession. The outpost had been a major point of contention for years. That's wonderful news, Yuna replied. Our scientists are eager to work alongside. Yours? The atmospheric reconstruction techniques your people have developed could revolutionize our approach to terraform Mars. High Priest Quan clicked something that the translator didn't catch. Hansu responded in their native tongue, his scales briefly darkening, a sign of emotional intensity that Yuna had learned to recognize. Is everything all right? She asked. Merely a clarification on religious protocol, Hansu explained smoothly. The High Priest wishes to offer a traditional blessing before the main course. The Andromeda observers shifted slightly, their crystalline recording devices humming as they adjusted to capture the unexpected ritual. This was the first time the Talons had ever incorporated their religious practices into diplomatic functions. Yuna nodded graciously. We would be honored. High Priest Quan rose, his ancient scales reflecting the blue lights in hypnotic patterns. From within his ceremonial robes, he produced a small crystal orb that glowed with an inner light. The Talon delegation immediately bowed their heads. The light of ancestral wisdom guides our path forward, Quan intoned, the translator giving his words a resonant depth. Today, we stand at a crossroads of destiny. The orb in his hands pulsed brighter. Daiho's hand moved subtly toward his concealed weapon, but Yuna gave him a warning glance. Interrupting a religious ceremony would be a devastating diplomatic error. The universe demands balance, Quan continued, moving the orb in a circular pattern. And balance requires sacrifice. The crystal began to emit a soft, musical tone that made the station's lights flicker momentarily. The human delegation exchanged confused glances. Dr. Sang leaned toward his sensor equipment, frowning. Ambassador, he whispered urgently. I'm detecting unusual energy patterns. He never finished his sentence. The crystal orb in Quan's hands flashed brilliantly, releasing a swarm of microscopic particles that filled the air like glittering dust. For one beautiful moment, the entire pavilion seemed filled with stars. Then the nano-explosives activated. The human delegation had no time to react. The particles had been programmed to target specific human DNA sequences, igniting in microsecond chain reactions. Ambassador Park felt a moment of intense heat before darkness claimed her. Around her, 15 members of her staff fell simultaneously, their bodies crumpling to the floor as the nano-explosives completed their gruesome work. The Andromeda observers recoiled in horror, their crystalline recording devices capturing every moment of the atrocity. The Talon delegation erupted in apparent panic, with Hansu shouting for medical assistance. Help them, someone help the humans, he cried, his scales flashing distress patterns that the observers would recognize as genuine shock. Only High Priest Quan remained still. The now dormant crystal orb returned to his robes. His inner eyelids flickered with satisfaction as chaos engulfed the pavilion. Emergency medical robots rushed into the room, their sensors immediately detecting no life signs. From Ambassador Park or her team, the station's AI triggered containment protocols, sealing the pavilion as alarms blared throughout Harmony Station. This is an outrage, declared the lead Andromeda observer, its translucent body pulsing with colors of distress. An assassination during peace talks violates every galactic convention. Hansu turned to the observer, his translator conveying perfect horror. The Talon hegemony had no knowledge of this attack. This must be the work of extremists who infiltrated our delegation. In the secured communications room 3 decks below, the message had already been sent to Earth. Ambassador Park and diplomatic team eliminated. Hostile action confirmed. Aboard the hidden Talon warship, Commander June received the encrypted message from Hansu. The obstruction is removed. The divine plan proceeds. June's scales darkened with unease as he gave orders to prepare for departure. The humans had been weak, bringing only words to a confrontation that had always been about existence itself. Their ambassador had died still believing in peace. A foolish human concept that had no place in the divine order of the universe. What the Talons didn't know, couldn't know, was that Unipark's final neural scan had been transmitted to Earth, in the moment of her death, carrying with it irrefutable evidence of their treachery. And with that evidence traveled something even more dangerous, the fury of a species who had genuinely sought peace only to be answered with murder. The holographic projection of Ambassador Unipark's final moments played in the center of Earth's Security Council chamber. 16 government leaders watched in grim silence as the glittering particles swarmed around the human delegation, followed by the flash of light that claimed their lives. When the recording ended, the room remained silent for 7 heartbeats. President Suk rose slowly from her chair. Her face, normally composed for political cameras, showed raw grief. "The Andromeda observers have verified the authenticity of this recording," she said, her voice steady despite her emotion. "Ambassador Park and her entire team were murdered during a formal diplomatic dinner. The Talon religious leadership orchestrated this attack while their diplomatic corps provided cover." Governor Han of the Mars colony slammed his fist on the table. "We should strike immediately. Their main fleet is still gathered near Proxima." "And start a full-scale war?" asked Governor Yoon of Europa. "That's exactly what the extremist elements want." The chamber erupted in heated debate, colonial interests clashing as they had for decades. Earth wanted caution, Mars demanded action. The outer colonies feared being sacrificed, as they had been in previous conflicts. President Suk let them argue for exactly 3 minutes before pressing a small button on her console. A low-frequency tone silenced the room. Ambassador Park believed. "In peace until her last breath," the president said. "Her neural upload confirms this, but she also prepared for failure." She tapped her console again, bringing up a new hologram, a recorded message from Yuna. The assassinated ambassador's image looked directly at them. "If you're seeing this, negotiations have failed catastrophically. The Talons never intended peace. Their religious doctrine cannot accommodate our existence as equals, but they've made a critical error. They believe we're divided and weak, they say." Hologram paused, seeming to look at each council member individually, prove them wrong. The message ended. In the silence that followed, something unprecedented happened. Governor Han stood and walked to Governor Yoon, 2 leaders whose colonies had been bitter rivals for resources and influence, and extended his hand. "Mars stands with Europa." One by one, the colonial representatives rose, centuries-old rivalries set aside in the face of a threat to humanity itself. President Suk waited until this moment of unity had crystallized before speaking again. "I have already recalled Admiral Jun Kim from the Tau Ceti outpost. He will serve as our new representative to the Talons." The councillors exchanged glances. Admiral Kim had strongly advocated for the peace mission. His brilliant tactical mind had been deliberately kept away from the negotiations to signal peaceful intentions. "And his orders?" asked Governor Han. "Justice," replied the president simply. Across human space, the response moved with quiet precision. Civilian news networks reported only that diplomatic complications had arisen, but military channels hummed with encrypted activity. Shipyards that had been operating at minimum capacity suddenly went to round-the-clock production. The massive dreadnought Pacific Shield, mothballed for 3 years as a peace gesture, was brought back online, its antimatter drives glowing, blue against the darkness of Neptune's orbit. On the Mars Military Academy grounds, Sunmi watched her commanding officer read the announcement to assembled cadets. Though the official statement mentioned only an incident resulting in Ambassador Park's death, the officer's tight voice told the true story. When he dismissed the formation, none of the cadets moved immediately. Sunmi looked around at her. Classmates, many of whom had families serving in diplomatic or military posts near Talon space, and saw the same steely determination reflected in their eyes. "Will we deploy?" asked her roommate Jin. "Not us," Sunmi replied. "Not yet, but soon." Like many cadets, she had trained in the new neural interface fighters, small, agile spacecraft that responded directly to pilot thought, capable of maneuvers. No conventional ship could match. Admiral Jun Kim arrived at Earth Orbital Command 26 hours after the assassination. He stepped from his shuttle, still wearing the everyday uniform he'd had on, when the recall reached him at Tau Ceti. Despite traveling for nearly a full day, his eyes were clear and focused as he was escorted directly to the President's secure conference room. "Admiral," President Suk greeted him, "thank you for coming so quickly." Kim bowed slightly. "I served with Una Park during the Enceladus crisis. She was one of our best." Yes, she was. The President activated a secure holographic display showing fleet movements throughout human space. The Talons have released a statement claiming that the assassination was perpetrated by rogue elements within their delegation. They express shock and call for continued dialogue. Kim studied the fleet movements rather than responding directly. Over 400 ships were subtly repositioning themselves, moving through normal trade routes but following very specific patterns that only a trained eye would recognize. "Have we responded to their message?" he asked finally. "No," said the President. "We've maintained complete communications silence." For the first time since arriving, Kim smiled slightly. "Good. They'll interpret that as fear or indecision." "That's what we're counting on." The President handed him a neural chip containing his full briefing. "You leave in 6 hours as our new representative. Your official mission is to continue the dialogue," Ambassador Park began. "And my actual mission?" President Suk's eyes hardened. "Make them understand exactly what they've done. Aboard the Talon command ship, Divine Will, Supreme Commander." Gil studied the human activity reports with growing satisfaction. 7 standard days had passed since the elimination of the human diplomatic team, and the expected retaliation had not materialized. "Their ships move, but they do not approach our space," he noted to High Priest Quan. "And their government maintains silence." Quan's scales rippled with pleasure. "They are paralyzed by fear, as the prophecy foretold. Without their chief diplomat, they have no one of sufficient rank willing to face us." A junior communications officer approached, bowing deeply. "Supreme Commander, we have received a message from Earth. They are sending a new representative to continue negotiations." Gil and Quan exchanged looks of triumph. "Who do they send?" Gil asked. "A military officer, an Admiral Kim." The message indicates he wishes to preserve Ambassador Park's vision of cooperation. Quan made a gesture of dismissal. "They send a soldier to do a diplomat's work. This confirms their desperation." What the Talons failed to recognize in their certainty was the true meaning of human silence. They didn't see the precision with which the human fleet had positioned itself, or understand why Earth would send a military strategist to a diplomatic mission. They would learn soon enough. The Crystal Palace hung in orbit above Talon Prime, its translucent walls capturing the light of the system's blue sun. Once a symbol of the hegemony's divine right to rule the stars, it now served as the stage for their submission. The palace's grand hall, where for centuries Talon leaders had plotted the subjugation of lesser species, was now filled with the soft hum of human tactical armor and the occasional click of Talon scales shifting in discomfort. Admiral Jun Kim stood at the head of the room, his black uniform devoid of any decoration except for a small silver pin, a replica of Ambassador Park's diplomatic insignia. Unlike the Talon leaders who wore elaborate ceremonial armor even in defeat, Kim's simplicity projected a quiet power that needed no adornment. "The terms are non-negotiable," Kim said, his voice carrying through the hall without the need for amplification. "The complete dismantling of the Talon fleet, all warships to be broken down under human supervision." Supreme Commander Gil's scales darkened with humiliation. Just 30 days earlier, he had stood in this same room boasting of the inevitable triumph over the humans. Now he watched as his civilization's military power was systematically dismantled by a species they had grievously underestimated. "Our defensive capabilities," Gil began, "will be limited to planetary orbit," Kim cut him off. "Any vessel detected beyond the orbital line will be destroyed without warning." High Priest Quan, his ceremonial robes now tattered from his desperate escape when the humans breached the inner system, hissed softly. "You cannot expect a species to remain trapped in their own system. This violates basic rights recognized by the Galactic Confederation." Kim turned his gaze to the priest. The human's eyes showed no anger, no triumph, only a steady, implacable purpose that was somehow more terrifying than rage. You forfeited those rights when you chose assassination over negotiation, Kim replied evenly. Be grateful your species will continue to exist at all. Around the room, holographic displays showed the current state of the Talon home system. The once mighty defense platforms that had ringed their 3 populated worlds now drifted as fields of debris. The human fleet, emerging seemingly from nowhere after weeks of silence, had struck with surgical precision, neutralizing the hegemony's military capabilities before they even realized they were under attack. Section 17, Kim continued, moving to the next term. Advanced propulsion technology. All research into faster-than-light travel will cease. Existing drive systems will be modified to operate at no more than 50% efficiency. Talon scientist called Rin stood shakily. This condemns us to technological stagnation. Our society cannot... Your society made its choice, Kim interrupted, his voice never rising. When you decided that Ambassador Park's peace offering was a threat to your supremacy, you chose this path. We are merely walking you down it. The E. Holographic displays shifted to show footage from the assassination, the glittering nanoparticles, the flash of light, the bodies of the human delegation collapsing. The Talons shifted uncomfortably, seeing their own actions through the eyes of those they had wronged. Kim let the footage play for exactly 30 seconds before continuing. Section 18 concerns education, he said. All Talon educational facilities will include mandatory curriculum on interspecies relations. The centerpiece of this curriculum will be a comprehensive study of Ambassador Una Park's life and diplomatic career. This caused a ripple of genuine shock among the Talon leadership. To immortalize a human in their education system struck at the core of their belief in their own superiority. Impossible, whispered Quan. The divine hierarchy cannot be undermined by... The divine hierarchy, Kim said coldly, is a fiction that led you to this moment. Your children will learn the truth, that your religious certainty blinded you to the consequences of your actions. From the back of the room, a Talon voice called out, "And if we refuse these terms?" Kim didn't bother looking for the speaker. Instead, he activated another holographic display. It showed the human fleet positioned around Talon Prime, 97 vessels, their weapon systems powered but dormant, a show of restraint, not weakness. There is no refusal, Kim stated simply, only acceptance or extinction. The choice is yours, but you have exactly 1 hour to decide. The Talon leaders huddled together, their scales alternately flashing patterns of rage and fear. Many looked to High Priest Quan, whose religious doctrine had promised them divine protection and cosmic superiority. The priest's scales had faded to a dull grey, the Talon equivalent of pallor. "How did we miscalculate so severely?" Gil whispered to Quan. Their response was neither impulsive nor emotional. It was methodical. "That is what we failed to understand," Quan replied softly. "We believed their emotions would make them weak or reckless. Instead, they transformed their grief into purpose." Across the room, Admiral Kim stood perfectly still, the small silver pin on his uniform catching the light of the blue sun. In his earpiece, he could hear the occasional status update from the fleet, but otherwise maintained complete silence, a silence that pressed down on the Talons like the gravity of a neutron star. A young Talon aide approached Kim cautiously, bearing a crystal tablet. "Admiral," the aide said, "I have been instructed to inform you that the Council accepts your terms in full." Kim nodded once, taking the tablet. "Begin the implementation immediately. The first human oversight teams will arrive within the hour." As the Talon leadership filed out, their once proud postures now bent with defeat, Kim allowed himself a private moment of reflection. He activated a small hologram projector in his hand, displaying an image of Una Park, not from her official, diplomatic portrait, but from their days as young officers training together. In the image, she was laughing, full of the hope and determination that had eventually led her to extend an olive branch to a species that could not comprehend it. "It's done, Una," he whispered. "Not the peace you wanted, but the justice you deserved." Kim deactivated the hologram and turned to the viewport. Beyond the Crystal Palace, the blue sun of Talon Prime was setting, casting long shadows across a civilization that had fundamentally changed course. In schools across their worlds, Generations of young Talons would learn about the human who came offering friendship and died for it, and how that death had revealed something fundamental about humanity that the Talons had failed to grasp. Not that humans were weak or driven by emotion, but that their greatest strength lay in transforming tragedy into resolve and resolve into action. It was a lesson the Talons would not forget. The end.